Brass Neck by Anne Butler.
The 1800s. In England, this was a difficult time for women who were independent-minded or who had an entrepreneurial spirit. When a woman married, legally, all of her money and property became her husband's. Unless a woman married a liberal-minded man, she owned nothing once she said her vows. Until an Act of Parliament in 1882, women in England could find themselves trapped in unhealthy or violent marriages with no way out unless their husbands wished it. They were powerless to prevent their husbands from making decisions on how money she earned might be spent. This is fact. What is also fact, but is less often talked about, are those independent-minded women who found ways to beat the system they've been born into. Those women who heard about and may have taken part in campaigns to end what was essentially confiscation of money and property following marriage, but had plans which didn't involve waiting for the government to save them. Why would the government come to their aid when so many of the men who sat in Parliament had acquired significant chunks of their wealth through marriage? No, for many women, their saviour was not sitting on the benches in Parliament. For women with the brass neck to take a chance, there was no need to suffer what society said was her lot. One such woman was Harriet Mildred Cooper. When Harriet was 19, her father brought home the man he wanted her to marry, Billy. Billy ran a run-down old pub several streets away. Her dad was one of his regulars. Billy was 38 and a widower with a sickly 7-year-old. He wanted a wife to look after the child's needs and to see to his own needs while he carried on running his pub. There was no discussion. Before she knew it, the bans were posted. 2 months later, she was married to Billy. She'd had no mum to tell her what was what, but she got the gist of things from the married women she worked with at her job at a wool mill. A job she had to give up to look after Billy's kiddie and help in the bar. Night times were a nightmare, but she made the best of things, and she didn't complain. Not 6 months later, the kiddie took a turn for the worse and sadly died. Billy seemed to shrug his shoulders and carried on as usual. But he now expected Harriet to help in the pub full time. He sacked his potman and told Harriet that was her job from now on. He tried to get her to see to some of the men, the customers who were looking for a bit of comfort. She told him as forcefully as she dared that she weren't having any of that. He didn't push too hard. But Harriet wondered whether it was only a matter of time before he took that choice away from her. Harriet was young, but she wasn't stupid. And crucially, she had the aforementioned brass neck. Billy had had things his own way for the best part of a year, and she knew it was just a matter of time before he forced her to lift her heels for his patrons. Husbands had the final say in all things. She needed to find a way out before it came to that. One day, Billy was getting ready for a delivery. Up and down those cellar steps he went. Harriet watched him, waiting for a chance, because she had an idea how to get out of the trap she knew he would set for her one of these days. On one of his trips up from the cellar, making his way up the steep, almost vertical steps, she kicked the trap door which she'd propped open. It whacked him in the face as it slammed shut. Harriet listened to the commotion as he fell onto barrels and who knew what else. And then she screamed for help, with her fingers crossed. People came running from every which direction, the sound of footsteps sloshing in the filth on the cobblestones outside. "He fell! He fell!" she screamed, pointing at the closed trap door. A couple of the men got the trapdoor open and made their way down into the gloom where an oil lamp was still burning. An old dear hugged and comforted Harriet, who carried on sobbing, convincing all comers that she was beside herself. They needed ropes to hoist Billy out of the cellar. As his torso emerged, his head lolled, and his eyelids were at half-mast. Harriet screamed a real scream this time, and her legs gave way. Someone clasped one of her shoulders as she braced her hands on the old, cold wood floor. It surprised her to realize it was the old potman. The thought churned in her panicked brain that terrible news does travel fast. "Poor love," said one of the women who had joined the crowd gathered in the open doorway and spilled out into the street, in spite of a miserable drizzle and the chill in the air. "And them not even married a year." There was an inquest. A formality. "I told him time and time again to put in proper staircases down to them cellars," said one witness. No one was surprised that the coroner ruled his death as accidental. Harriet reopened the pub after the funeral. Her dad came and offered to help her run things. But, as we've already established, Harriet is no fool. She saw which way that wind was blowing. She told him she'd manage. How? Her dad wanted to know. How indeed. She'd learned a lot over the months, enough to know that she would need to get proper help in. Help beyond those who gave her a few hours in between their factory and dray drops out of sympathy for her being a young widow. The potman paid her a visit, days after she'd sent her dad packing. To pay his respects, he said. Harriet rehired him. He was grateful for the chance to earn money again, being as he was only days away from the workhouse, he told her. He showed her more and more about the proper running of the pub, but crucially gave her some important information. He confirmed that Billy had no family, something Harriet had suspected, but which Billy would never talk about. None of your business, he'd said the only time she'd tried to find out who his people were. The potman told her that Billy's dad had run the pub before him, and that when he died, Billy had taken over. He confirmed, what she suspected, that Billy had not been a tenant at the pub, but that he owned it. And as Billy had no family, that meant the pub was now Harriet's. At the age of 20, she owned a business of her own, thanks to a, as the coroner had put it, faulty trapdoor. Over the days, weeks, and months, she learned more from the potman and the lady that she brought in to tend the bar. She learned the ins and outs of stock keeping, stopping the ale from spoiling, and not falling foul of the law through not knowing any better. She became fond of her staff, of her little team, and especially of the old potman, and he became fond of her. In spite of all the want-to-be suitors who stopped by, Harriet remained a widow. She was more than happy with her lot. She was quite content. One day, many years later, when he was retired on account of his arthritis, but would still pop by for his free glass of ale and to sit a while in the warmth, the potman told her, "You did good, girl. You did what you had to." Harriet looked at him, startled. And do you know, that old potman just gave her a crafty smile and winked. "I saw you do it, my girl. I saw it all."
You have just listened to Brass Neck. The story was written by Anne Butler. Please like and share if you enjoyed this story. Subscribe to receive notification of new episodes. Note that no portion of this production may be adapted or broadcast without written permission from a member of the Book Griffin team.